Welcome everybody, this is Black Fate. This is the second video in the Optimal Animation video series for Vermintide 2. Today we will be covering Saltzpyre, and we're going to start with his Rapier. So the first thing is it has this pistol, but I'm not going to touch on the pistol because it's really bad. You can do very well with the Rapier without ever shooting the pistol. So I'm just going to completely ignore it. Now the Rapier has two main quirks. The first being its push stab. Only takes one stamina, so it's very spammable. And its charge attacks have two charge tiers. There's this faster one, and then if you hold it longer, the weapon comes all the way back and starts to shake. You do more damage, of course it takes longer. I think tier 1 is usually better DPS against most things, but tier 2 it's not that much worse, except against bosses, we'll get to that, but it's not that much worse in most situations. For hordes, I think there's two valid options, either charge spam or light spam. But when I say light spam, I don't just mean true light spam, because you really want these first two lights, and when you light spam, you actually do light 2 and 3 back and forth. So there's one attack there, like half your attacks, that'll be wasted. So to get those two overhead lights, I like to do push stab, light, light. It's really nice because you throw a push in there, and you get 3 lights in that time, and it's pretty good DPS. The reason why you want those two overhead lights is just to get headshots easier. And Rapier has really good headshot multiplier in all of its attacks, so you do a lot more damage if you're getting headshots with the lights. The main difference between charge spam and light spam against hordes is control. So charge spam will do better damage, especially if you hit multiple targets. You actually do full damage to every target, even armor, so it's really powerful for DPS, but of course you have to aim at every target. So if you're getting surrounded, push stab, light, light to gain control, to do okay DPS, but whenever you can, go to charge attacks for DPS. Then for armor, charge spam, plain and simple, go for headshots. If you end up doing a tier 2 charge attack to get a headshot, it's usually worth it. For Chaos Warriors, I might err on tier 2 charge attacks more because they do almost twice the damage, and it's like the Rapier does terrible damage to Chaos Warriors in general, so I think tier 2 might be worth it then. But really it's more important to get headshots, not which tier you use. Then for bosses, I kind of alluded to this. Tier 1 charge spam is much better than tier 2. So once again, if you're going for a headshot, sure, use a tier 2, it's probably worth it, but tier 1 all the way. We're going to move on to the two-handed sword. It's the same two-handed sword that Kruber has. It's way more straightforward. There's no quirks with it. For hordes, light spam, best DPS. If you get higher density, and light spam can run into cleave issues on high density, especially chaos hordes, that's where charge spam is really powerful. You have a ton of cleave with charge spam. So use that at your discretion, but whenever you can, light spam for DPS. Then against armor, you've got two options, charge spam or push stab spam. Now push stab spam does much better damage, but of course it takes stamina, so you have a limited damage volume to work with. You can use that maybe to snipe a single storm vermin as it's joining, so that you have free reign on the horde that's following it, but realize you can't really snipe a chaos warrior quickly or efficiently, or maybe even at all, so you probably want to switch to charge spam as soon as you can. And the really powerful thing about charge spam with armor is that it cleaves through armor and does damage to everything around it. To a certain limit, of course, but it's pretty efficient against mixed hordes and armor. And to that end, if there's like a Chaos Warrior mixed in, I might not even try to DPS the Chaos Warrior down, especially if you have a team that you know is going to be good at that. That's where I would tend to just charge attack everything else and try to clear the way for my team to kill the Chaos Warrior. For bosses, charge spam is the best DPS. Moving on to the Flail. It's a pretty fun weapon in my opinion, but it's not terribly good. Its main quirk is that all of its attacks will ignore shields, just do damage as if the shield wasn't there. It doesn't break shields or anything, but still really powerful, especially because all of its attacks do some armor damage, so it's really efficient against shielded storm vermin. Now for hordes, I think there's a couple options, well, three options really. You either do light spam, block reset. This is your best DPS. But what I often like to do is charge 1 into light 2. I think this is more control, but sacrificing a little bit of DPS. Just that charge 1 has a lot of cleave and will actually cleave through hyperdensity relatively well, or at least high density. Light 1, 2 repeat, that can run into huge cleave issues on even medium to high density. So be careful about using that all the time. But the most controlling attack pattern is push, stab, charge, light. You get a push, a left attack, a right attack with a lot of cleave, and then another left attack. So you cover both sides really well, and you get really good damage and cleave on both sides, but it's slow, and it costs stamina, so only use that if you really need control on the horde. And real quick, I don't use charge spam because it's really slow, and it's two right side attacks. So if there's stuff on the left, you're probably not going to get to it, and you're going to get hit unnecessarily. That's why I like to throw in that light on the other side for control. For armor, push, stab, light is the way to go. You want these two overheads, and this is the fastest way to get to them. It's lights 3 and 4, those two overheads. You also can do charge into a full light pattern and eventually get to those two overheads. I only do that when control is necessary once again, but if you're doing strictly DPS, then push, stab, light on repeat. You can spam this quite a lot if you have a bit of stamina recovery. The problem is Flail only has 2 stamina base, so you're going to want to either stack stamina so you can spam this, and or get stamina recovery, say on a trinket or on a talent, so that you can spam it. For bosses, once again, lights 3 and 4, those two overheads, are your best DPS. So push, stab, light spam. If you run out of stamina, just go to light spam. Don't bother with charge attacks. They do the same damage as the first two lights, so you're just wasting time. Now the axe, this is a great weapon right now. Really solid all-around performance. It can struggle against hordes, but basically you're only going to use one animation pattern, light spam. It's really good against everything, hordes, armor, and bosses. However, as I said, you can struggle to control hordes. You do good damage to hordes, but you're only going to ever hit one target, really. You technically can hit 2, but it does like less than a quarter of the damage to the second target, and you're only going to hit 2 slave rats, maybe, not 2 of anything meaningful. So to get around that low cleave, you just dodge dance and use the maximum reach nicely. The one major quirk is that the light pattern has extra crit chance, which is not really a quirk, it's just a nice bonus and makes the lights even more powerful. It's easy to maintain swift sling because of this. The only times I'll actually use charge attacks, these overheads, is against wooden shields because it breaks them, and maybe at the beginning of an engagement you just start with a charge attack and then go into light spam for a touch more DPS at the very beginning. It's really not worth it all the time, but it's like a cheeky little bit of damage, might as well. Then we're going to move on to the falchion. So the falchion is functionally a sword. Nothing really strange about it. For hordes, I like to do light spam. Charge spam is not terrible, but it's slow and doesn't have the reach or cleave you really need to maintain control, so you're going to hit trade if you do charge spam. You also can do like light charge attack, a little bit more better like kind of damage and control, but light spam is really the best. If you really need control though, push stab into light spam, because you do a push and then another light before you go into the full light pattern, so push stab is really your form of control, your best form of control, not charge attacks. For armor, there's a little bit of a toss-up. Lights actually do okay damage to armor if you're getting headshots and crits. If not, it's kind of bad. The first 2 lights only do like 3 damage to body shots on armor if it's not a crit, so you can lose efficiency there, and what I often like to do is charge light. And this gets the overhead, which is really your powerful attack. Whereas if you did charge light, you go back to light 1, not light 3, which is unfortunate. So either light spam or charge light. Your choice. It's actually pretty efficient if there's mixed hordes and armor, just light spam, because every attack is going to be efficient. You know, somehow you don't cleave through armor with charge attacks either, so you might as well light spam. Try to get armor with that third light because it's this overhead and it does more base damage to armor, and it's an overhead so you can get headshots easier. Against bosses, light spam is the best. Don't fiddle with charge attacks. Then we're going to move on to the Axe+Falchion, the DLC weapon, arguably Salty's best weapon right now. The only thing that you should know is that the lights, it alternates between 2 axe lights and 2 falchion lights. The axe lights are axe lights and the falchion lights are falchion lights, so treat them as such. They're not all the exact same attack. You have different cleave and damage values with them, so try to account for that in what you're fighting. But for hordes, I would do light spam. If you feel like this isn't quite enough control because you have, you know, half of your attacks are axe attacks, then you can do push stab, light to get just falchion attacks. And if you're under a lot of pressure, spamming this is pretty good. But it is lower DPS than full light spam because the axe lights are actually really powerful right now. Now, for armor, you have 2 options. Light spam is actually not bad, especially if you're getting headshots and crits. You do great armor DPS. But if you're doing strictly, you know, best armor DPS, charge spam is actually better, I think, technically. A little bit. If it's just one Chaos Warrior, run up, you know, charge spam, go for headshots. But if you have, you know, multiple armored entities, and you have, you know, mixed armor and horde, then light spam. One note about the charge spam is after charge 2, this wide one, you can do light, and it's 2 axe lights. It's not that relevant. It is maybe a slightly better DPS, but it's not really worth it right now, because the charge attacks are just so powerful by themselves. Maybe if it gets nerfed someday, you can, you know, use the information that 2 lights after charge 2 will be axe lights. Then finally for bosses, charge spam. Much better than light spam, so just charge spam on bosses and you do pretty good boss damage. And that's it. Thank you for watching.